everybody, it's Debbie here. Welcome back to My Crafty Den. If you're new here, thank you so much for joining me. And if you like what you see, please consider hitting the subscribe button so that you can come back and view some more of my videos. And if you are a returning subscriber, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate each and every single view. So let's get started. So for today's project, I'm sharing myself while I'm making a masterboard. So what a masterboard is just a background piece of artwork type of thing that basically you're creating your own paper. So I'm going to do it. You can do them so many ways, but I'm going to do it by collaging a bunch of papers and different things together on this piece of used printer paper. I mean, I could have tossed this in the garbage, but I thought why I could just use it to use as a back page to put these two book sheets on. And these two book sheets are going to be my start and my jump off point for this masterboard. I just love the way old book pages have that kind of faded beigey yellow color to them. Not quite vintage yet. This one could be darker. So I am going to use this old piece of pattern tissue from, this is a, I can't see, Butterick pattern, I think. But I buy patterns when I go to yard sales or anytime I see them for sale somewhere. I love to pick them up. They sell so cheap and they have some great artwork on the front of some of them. Some of the old vintage bits of clothing that people made, the pictures on the fronts of the patterns, just the pattern packaging is nice in and of itself. And then you have this lovely tissue paper pattern that you can use for so many different things in your paper crafting. I think it's amazing. So I am using Mod Podge and I'm just adhering this tissue down to those book pages. It gives another layer of depth. You can see the printing on the pattern, and then below that you can see the printing, the little bit of printing that was on the front of those book pages as well. So it already has a little bit of depth to it. And then the next thing I'm going to do is use just some of my old scrap papers, and I am going to, I've chosen some that have a vintage feel to them. I'm going for a really vintage look for this masterboard. I really, really want to use it for a vintage craft, a vintage paper craft later in the month. And I thought if I do this now, then I have this extra piece of paper that I may be able to use in that. So I don't want any straight edges in the middle. I'm trying to avoid having straight edges in the middle of this piece. So if there's a straight edge, I'm just putting it around the outside edge of the paper and the actual page, and then gluing it down. Now you could use white glue for this, Mod Podge. You could use a gel medium. You're not having to use Mod Podge to do this. It's just what I had on hand. So always use what I have on hand. So I'm not trying to fill this whole page over with scrapbooking paper pieces, because then if I do that, I'll lose the book pages in the background and I'll lose the feel of that that tissue paper underneath, and that's part of what I want on here. So I'm just putting bits and pieces of different pages around. So I'm tearing off I'm not going to put this along the outside edge, and I just liked the colors that were on that piece of paper. So I just tore the edges off, ripped it in four, and thought, well, I'll stick these four little bits down on here for a little bit of color. Not too much color, nothing bright, or I don't want anything bright and sunny on here. I'm going for that worn, old, faded ink type of vintage look. So I got those four little pieces down, and then I have this other kind of rusty orange with some gold on it. I love the idea of having a little bit of gold foiling in here, so I'm just ripping some pieces off. I'm not putting very big pieces of this in any one spot. I don't want it to be a focal point or anything. I just want little touches of that color. These orangey reds and browns with gold and stuff, they kind of give a feel of a rusted metal. At least that's what I'm going for when I add these colors. So I cut that piece, or I tore that piece into some fairly small little bits. It's a little brighter reddish, rusty red color as opposed to that orangey color, but it goes, so I thought I'd add it in. It still goes with these colors. You notice how I'm still leaving enough of that pattern showing through so that you can tell it's there, and I'm getting so much depth. At this point, I can see the depth in this, the layers, bits and pieces on top of other bits and pieces. And it's starting to get there. It's starting to give me that look that I want. And I think I've pretty much got the color that I want down on this. So I'm making sure that I have all my edges down really good with the Mod Podge and trimmed it out, and now I'm drying it, making sure it's nice and dry. Now, at this point, because I have it trimmed out, I can take a really good look at it and decide what I want to do. So I found this little stamp in my stash, and it's an ampersand, and I'm going to use that. But before I use it, I'm taking one of these little Tim Holtz ink pads, and I think this one is Vintage Photo, and I am going around all the pieces, like any place where I can tell that there's a raised edge that may catch and hold the ink. I'm just trying to do that, and I'm trying to cover up and make sure I have no vibrant white, just even the torn edges of the papers. I don't want that vibrant white showing. I was just checking to see the color there because I do like this color. It's so perfect on this page. So another little dry with my heat tool, because the Tim Holtz is not a permanent ink. And I know that on top of that Mod Podge, it's going to, I just called it Mod Podge. On top of that Mod Podge, it's going to run when I add any other kind of liquid medium to it. So this ampersand, though, is such a cool stamp. And I think I got it for $1.50 when you go to Michael's and they have those stamps in the bins by the checkout. Yeah, always check those out because they have some really cool stamps there, and that's where I got this one. So there's just enough on this, and make sure you go off the page when you're using it. Yeah, you want the stamps to go off the page and look like that this piece of paper came from a larger piece. So I think I'm getting enough there, enough of that black. Now the black won't run, but the Tim Holtz ink is going to run. And at this point, I'm done. I'm really liking the look of this. And I'm going to seal it with some clear, after I dry it, I'm going to seal it with some clear gesso. And I do that so that when I use this paper later on down the line, I can put any kind of medium on it and I don't have to worry about what's already on there, because I may not remember what's already on there. I may not use this for a while. So I am going to put some clear gesso over this so that it's ready to use down the line. So, and I put a little bit too much on. I know I wanted to make sure I had enough for good measure, but I did put a little bit too much on. I'm just using a makeup sponge and I'm just dabbing this all around. At least I start dabbing it all around. And then when I see that Tim Holtz ink is picking up into the gesso and giving it that golden look, I decide to start spreading it so that I can get that back into those little nooks and crannies where I want it. And that's all I'm going to do with this. I'm going to give this a dry. I'm going to take off the excess. I'm going to give this a dry. And then I'm going to put it in my paper stash so that I have it down the road when I want to do a nice vintage project. So that's all there is to making a motherboard. You don't have to do, it doesn't have to be a collage sheet. You can paint them. You can blend paints. You can use dyes. You can use inks. You can stamp, and you can put anything that you want on a background. So go, if you haven't done them before, be sure you go check out some videos and see how all the different people do them. So that's all for now, everybody. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.